The two men who defeated death, Nicolas Flamel and the Count of Saint Germain. Throughout the darkest pages of history, there are stories so mysterious that it becomes almost impossible to determine where fact ends and myth begins. Among the most fascinating are the stories of Nicolas Flamel and the Count of Saint Germain. One was a medieval scholar and alchemist surrounded by legends of the Philosopher's Stone. The other appeared in 18th-century Europe as a mysterious aristocrat whose age, origins, and knowledge seemed to defy explanation. And both became associated with the same extraordinary claim. They had discovered a way to defeat death. But what was really behind these legends? Nicolas Flamel, the alchemist who conquered death. Nicolas Flamel was a French scribe and bookseller who lived around the late 14th and early 15th centuries. Historical evidence indicates that Flamel was a real person. But centuries after his death, an entirely different story began to emerge around his name. According to legend, Flamel discovered a mysterious ancient manuscript. It was said to contain strange symbols, hidden messages, and secret knowledge concerning the transformation of matter. For years, Flamel supposedly searched for the meaning behind its mysterious pages. And eventually, he was said to have discovered the secret of the Philosopher's Stone. In alchemical tradition, the Philosopher's Stone was a legendary substance believed to possess extraordinary powers. It was associated with the transformation of base metals into gold and, in later traditions, with the creation of an elixir capable of extending human life. This is where the legend of Flamel truly begins. According to later stories, Flamel and his wife, Pernelle, succeeded in creating the mysterious substance. They supposedly gained enormous wealth. But then something even stranger happened. Stories began circulating that after Flamel's death, his tomb was opened. And his body was nowhere to be found. The story spread across Europe. And eventually, a question emerged. Had Nicolas Flamel really died, or had he somehow escaped death itself? There is no reliable historical evidence proving that Flamel became immortal. Modern historians generally consider the stories of his alchemical discoveries and immortality to be legends that developed long after his lifetime. But by then, the myth had already taken on a life of its own. Nicolas Flamel was no longer remembered merely as a medieval bookseller. He had become the legendary symbol of the immortal alchemist. The Count of Saint Germain. The man who had lived for centuries. The second figure is perhaps even more mysterious. His name was the Count of Saint Germain. During the 18th century, this mysterious man appeared among European aristocrats, diplomats, and royal courts. His real identity, date of birth, and origins have remained subjects of debate. He was described as extraordinarily educated. He was supposedly fluent in numerous languages, knowledgeable about music, painting, chemistry, and alchemy. But the strangest stories concerned his age. Some people claim that Saint Germain spoke about historical events as though he had personally witnessed them. He seemed to know things about the distant past that, according to the stories, he should never have known. It was almost as if he had actually been there. Some legends claimed that he had lived for hundreds of years. Later occult traditions went even further, portraying Saint Germain not as an ordinary human being, but as an immortal master who had appeared throughout different periods of history. Some esoteric traditions even claimed that he had lived under different identities across different centuries. But once again, there is a problem. There is no reliable historical evidence proving that Saint Germain was immortal. So why did the legend survive for so long? Perhaps because Saint Germain himself revealed so little about his past. He surrounded his origins with mystery. And sometimes, the greatest mystery is created by a person who tells you almost nothing about himself. Two men, one impossible secret. Nicolas Flamel and the Count of Saint Germain lived centuries apart. Yet their legends contain remarkable similarities. Both became associated with alchemy. Both were portrayed as possessing extraordinary knowledge. Both became connected with mysterious stories about death and longevity. And both eventually became symbols of immortality. But this raises a much deeper question. What if the true purpose of ancient alchemy was never simply to make a human being physically immortal? What if the philosopher's stone was never just a literal stone? Perhaps it represented the transformation of the human being itself. Just as alchemy described the transformation of lead into gold, perhaps it also symbolized the transformation of ignorance into knowledge, fear into courage, and the fear of death into the search for something eternal. If that interpretation is correct, then the immortality of Flamel may have a completely different meaning. Because the human body eventually dies. But a person's name, their ideas, and their story can survive for centuries. So, what is the truth? Nicolas Flamel was almost certainly a real historical figure who lived in medieval France. The Count of Saint Germain also appears to have been a real 18th century individual. But there is no scientific or reliable historical evidence proving that either man defeated death. There is no proven philosopher's stone capable of granting eternal life. And there is no verified evidence that Saint Germain lived for centuries. Yet their stories reveal something much more important. Throughout history, humanity has asked the same question. Can death be defeated? The ancient Egyptians searched for answers in their tombs. Alchemists searched for them in secret laboratories. Philosophers searched for them through ideas and reason. And modern scientists continue the search through genetics, regenerative medicine, and research into the aging process. Perhaps humanity will never truly escape death. But every generation continues to search for its secret. And the legends of Nicolas Flamel and the Count of Saint Germain remind us of something extraordinary. Perhaps the greatest mystery is not how they lived, but why humanity believed they could never die. Maybe they never actually defeated death. Maybe their true immortality was simply that humanity never stopped talking about them.